One of the best coffee creamers you can be using if you're looking to achieve a weight loss goal is half and half or heavy whipping cream. Both of these options are very low in sugar. In fact, they contain 0 grams of added sugar and only really small amounts of the sugar lactose, which means that they won't greatly spike the storing hormone insulin, which then allows your body to actually maintain fat burning. They're also both great options if you're using intermittent fasting as a tool because they don't spike that storing hormone insulin. But if you are using it during your fasting period, I do recommend keeping it to about 1 tablespoon. My name's Autumn and I'm a certified clinical nutritionist with my master's nutrition human performance. Now the next coffee creamer is one of the worst coffee creamers you can be using, especially if you're looking to achieve a weight loss goal, and that's the variety of Coffee Mate. Now just 1 tablespoon of Coffee Mate creamers tend to have about 5 grams of sugar. It also contains the inflammatory vegetable oil, and let's say you're using about 2 tablespoons worth of Coffee Mate in your coffee. This is 10 grams of added sugar paired with that inflammatory oil. And sugar in drinks is especially a problem if you are looking to achieve a weight loss goal because there's nothing really to slow it down. So you get this really immediate spike in blood glucose, which results in that rapid increase in the storing hormone insulin, which then shifts the body into storing mode while also turning off fat burning. Now the next coffee creamer is actually a pretty good one, and it's almond, coconut, or other nut milk options. And as long as you're choosing the unsweetened variety, these are actually pretty great. Because they're coming from nuts or seeds, they're going to have essentially 0 grams of carbohydrates. And obviously if you are choosing the unsweetened option, it's going to be free of added sugars. It also has a little bit of high quality fats in there too, which the fats are important to help raise your satiety hormone and tell your brain that you're feeling full and satisfied. And it turns out fat has nearly 0 response on insulin, so we don't have to worry about it raising the insulin level and shifting the body out of fat burning. Which brings me to the next really similar option, and those are nut pods. These have just blown up everywhere. When I asked you guys about various coffee creamers, the top ones that you said you would have are usually going to be heavy cream, half and half, or nut pods. And honestly, great job, because if you're going to be choosing a pre-made creamer, this is one of the better options. So nut pods use coconut cream and almonds as the base, so pretty similar to using almond milk or coconut milk, but by using coconut cream, it helps to make it a little more thick and satisfying. It helps to add that creaminess sensation that you would normally get from heavy whipping cream or half and half. But make sure that you are using the unsweetened option. The sweetened isn't actually that bad, especially compared to a lot of other sweetened coffee creamers, but it does use erythritol, which is a sugar alcohol. And for some people, sugar alcohols can cause some GI distress and bloating. So I recommend testing out the unsweetened nut pods first, especially if you're using it on a daily basis. Okay, another really common coffee creamer that I highly recommend that you don't use is called International Delight. Just like the Coffee Mate, it uses about 5 grams of added sugar per 1 tablespoon, which can really start to add up, especially if you're using more than 1 tablespoon in your coffee, or if you're having multiple coffees a day and therefore using multiple tablespoons throughout the day too. Especially if you're sensitive to carbohydrates or you have some degree of insulin resistance, these added sugars can be a really big problem for actually achieving a weight loss goal, especially when there's so many other great unsweetened options that have nearly 0 impact on insulin that you can use instead. Okay, the next category are the collagen creamers, which probably the most popular one would be Vital Proteins. So the great thing about collagen is that it can be really useful to help boost satiety. Now, I personally don't use collagen in my coffee because I do use intermittent fasting, and amino acids, which is the breakdown product of proteins, can cause insulin to be secreted, so it would break a fast. So if you are using intermittent fasting, just make sure to have it during your eating window versus your fasting window. Okay, another really popular one that is on the better side in terms of coffee creamers is going to be Laird's. Now, what I love about them is that they do use higher quality fats, which remember don't really have that same impact on insulin the way that carbohydrates and sugars do. But one slight caveat here is that it does use coconut sugar, albeit a very small amount. 1 tablespoon has about 2 grams of sugar. Now this one really depends on your own carbohydrate sensitivity. If weight loss isn't your goal, this 2 grams probably won't be super significant, and it is definitely a much better, healthier option than some of those other creamers like Coffee Mate or International Delight. However, for myself personally, as a good rule of thumb, I generally try and stay away from any added sugars in drinks, especially if it's going to be consumed on a daily basis. And especially if there's really great 0 sugar alternatives that can be used instead. But regardless if you're carb sensitive or not, this is something that you don't want to have during your fasting window if you're using intermittent fasting, because it does contain sugar. It will break a fast. Okay, the next really popular brand is Califia Farms. Now, they have a couple different versions. Some are great, some are not so great. Now, the first option is actually pretty great. And this is their vanilla almond milk creamer. It uses almond milk. It does still use cane sugar, although it is about 2 grams per 1 tablespoon serving, so less than half of some of those other coffee creamers. It also uses coconut milk as well as vanilla extract. So other than the actual cane sugar, it's actually some pretty clean ingredients. So if you aren't carb sensitive, and especially if you aren't looking to achieve a weight loss goal, this should be a pretty good option. Although if you are carb sensitive and you are looking to achieve a weight loss goal, then you'll want to go for one of those zero sugar options. Now, the other really popular option is going to be their barista blends, especially the oat milk option. These are really popular and used in a lot of lattes. Now, the oat milk option at about 8 ounces will have about 12 net grams of carbohydrates, as well as 7 grams of fat. Now, my concern with this is the relatively high amount of net carbs in a drink with the relatively higher amount of fat. When you combine the sweet taste of carbohydrates with fat, it can achieve this level of a bliss point, which can make it highly addictive and bypass a lot of satiety cues. This is probably also why it's much more popular than almond milk lattes, because it does have that sweet and creamy taste with the carbohydrates and the fat. But oats contain starches that do break down into sugars, which is why it does taste more sweet. And if you are carb sensitive, it's definitely something that you won't want to be opting for. And instead, if you do plan on having a latte, using an almond milk or coconut milk, hemp seed milk, any of those nut or seed milks as an alternative instead. Now, next on the list is Picnic. And I've done a video or blog post in the past, I can't quite remember, on how I'm not a huge fan of Picnic, but since then they seem to have changed up their ingredients a bit, and now some of their creamers are actually pretty good options, or at least what they call their keto creamer is. I love that it uses both grass-fed butter as well as whey. So the grass-fed butter is generally going to be really rich in butyric acid, which has been studied to really help keep inflammation in the GI tract down, as well as a super important vitamin called vitamin K2, which helps bring the calcium out of the arteries and into the bones. So vitamin K2 is really heart and bone protective. The Picnic keto creamer options also contain 0 grams of sugar. Now, the combination of the fat and the whey means you're getting both fat and protein. So you're getting both satiety hormones triggered, which can really help prevent snacking later in the day. However, if you are using intermittent fasting, remember proteins can break a fast, so just make sure you have this during your eating window. Now, next is Dunkin creamers. Now, you'll often see it in those little individual packets, like the ones that you'll see when you're out to breakfast. And compared to some of those other really sketchy coffee creamers, this one isn't the worst. It does use real milk, and it does come in at about 3 grams of sugar per serving. So it is slightly lower in sugar than some of those other not so great options, although I still wouldn't recommend it if you are looking to achieve a weight loss goal, particularly if you are carb sensitive. Plus, it does have a few sketchy ingredients still included, like carrageenan, that you'd just be better off skipping. Other than the possible links of carrageenan to cancer, it can also tend to cause some bloating and GI distress, which obviously is something that we don't really want. Now, the 11th and bonus coffee creamer that we're going to talk about is whole milk. This hugely depends on your carbohydrate sensitivity. I do love that it's a real food, and especially if you're getting the grass-fed option, you get the perks of vitamin K2, but it also has that problem with the bliss point because it does have a fairly high amount of fat as well as the lactose sugar. And if you're getting like a vanilla latte option with whole milk, you're adding sugar on top of the fat, which means you're really achieving that bliss point. It's highly addictive, and it's really going to spike that storing hormone insulin. But if you add a splash of whole milk to your coffee that amounts to about 1 or 2 tablespoons, this really shouldn't be a significant amount of lactose to cause any issues. Otherwise, if you are very carb sensitive, you'll want to go for one of those zero sugar options or the real food options of heavy cream or half and half. Now, my personal favorite way to have coffee is with keto coffee, which you can check out my recipe with this video next. Also, if you're new to my channel and you love this science-backed information, make sure you subscribe right here. Come out, new videos every Tuesday and Thursday. All right, guys, thanks so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in my next video.